Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Maryland Recycling Network's webinar on myths and facts surrounding textile recycling. I'm Peter Houstel, MRN's Executive Director, and we'll soon be joined by Lisa Sciannella from Helpsy. She's going to set the record straight on the problem that is textile waste. But before we go there, let's take a minute to look at our upcoming calendar. On September 26th, we'll have a webinar with Mark Stedman from Call to Recycle, where he's going to share effective options for battery collection and recycling. Those of you who were at the conference last June may recall that we were going to have Mark join us virtually, but there was a virtual gremlin, I guess, that got in the way of that. So he's going to get a chance to reprise his presentation in September. So please make sure you sign up for that one. It'll be posted. It's posted on the website right now, so you can sign up today. Then on October 17th, we're going to hear from Community Forklift about their catalyzing community good through building material reuse. They are a building materials reuser, which really reaches out and not only do they collect the material, but they distribute it in a variety of ways, both to people who can afford to pay a little bit, but also more importantly to those who can't afford it, but really do need it. A great program to hear about. So I hope you'll join us then on October 17th. And last but not least, we'll be back at the Turf Valley Conference Center next June 9th, Monday, June 9th, with the 2025 MRN Swana Mid-Atlantic Conference. Had a great conference this year, record attendance, and we expect to break that record again next year. So I hope you'll be part of the party. So on the admin side of things, we'll be posting a recording of this webinar, which you're welcome to share with any and all who might be interested. So keep an eye on your email, and the link should be coming shortly. And then, of course, while most of these programs are free, they depend on the financial support of our members. As I'm sure you've heard me say many times before, we don't have any non-members, we just have non-paying members. And so if you're one of those non-paying members, please head over to our website and after this program and join today. You can become a member for as little as $25 a year. That's like 50 cents a day, or 50 cents a week, I'm sorry. Got to work on my math there. 50 cents a week, you can afford that. And it will help MRN continue to do the work that we do to support the recycling and the other two R's in Maryland. And speaking of support, we do have our patrons and sustaining members who I want to give a shout out to, because they really help us get over the top with respect to our ability to drive your efforts to support reduction, reuse, and recycling in Maryland. So regardless of how much you decide to pay, please become a paying member today if you're not already. And for those of you who are members, thank you very much for supporting us all this time. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, without further ado, it's time to turn the mic and the screen over to Lisa so she can share her ideas and inspiration with you. Lisa, take it away.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm really excited to be here. Like Peter said, I'm Chief of Staff at Helpsy, so I'm just going to start and tell you a little bit about Helpsy, but my role today is really just to talk about myths surrounding textile recycling. So Helpsy's mission is to keep clothes out of the trash and provide honorable work for all of our employees. We're a certified B Corporation and public benefit corporation, which means that we meet high standards of verified social and environmental performance. My name is Lisa. I live in Frederick, Maryland. I am a TERP alum. I'm actually a double TERP. I'm getting my MBA now, actually. In a previous career, I was a secondary math teacher. So I taught in Annapolis, in Hagerstown, and in Thurmont before switching careers. Clothes aren't trash. That's one of Helpsy's hashtags, and it's something that I've learned a lot about since I started working here. Like many of you, I assume, I didn't really think too much about what happens to clothes once you put it in the bin. But learning what happens to it has only made me more passionate about diverting these textiles and materials and finding their best reuse. The bottom right picture is a picture I took recently. I live in a townhouse and we share the garbage, and somebody literally threw out like 2 bags of perfectly good clothes. So what did I do? Obviously, I took them home and put them in a Helpsy bin. But that's something that happens, and I think people may not be aware of the usefulness or the value that textiles have. And I'll start with just an outline of what I'm going to talk about. So we did our introductions. Please feel free to put in the chat like where you're from and what you're hoping to learn. Like Peter said, we'll be monitoring the chat, so I want to make sure that I know who's here and what questions you have. We'll start with just talking about the textile waste problem in general, common misconceptions, and then diving into what actually happens to used clothing. In the recent last couple of months, I've been fortunate to travel and kind of like following the textiles and seeing how different countries are handling the textiles that we sell to. Then I'll touch on some legislation and kind of what we need from like a big picture to make a circular economy for textiles. And then I'll just tell you a little bit about Helpsy specifically if you're looking to get involved, and we'll leave some time for Q&A. And there's a couple of pictures all in Maryland of either bins that we have. This one's a drive that we did in Frederick County with Peter. This is in the Montgomery County Recycling Center, which I think you guys visited a couple weeks ago. And this one is with Trevor in Baltimore. So the textile waste problem, these are my feet at a landfill. There's actually clothes in there. If you haven't been, you will find some. So in the United States, we discard about 104 pounds of textiles per person per year, which is crazy. That's a lot of pounds. Per capita textile waste has grown 55% in the last 20 years. Textile production has also doubled, and more than half of fast fashion is disposed of in under a year. So all this means is we're producing clothes faster and getting rid of them faster. And currently 85% of clothes end up in the municipal waste stream. So that means the landfill or incinerator. So if you think about for a minute, all the Goodwills, all the thrift stores, all the clothing drives, all the Helpsy bins and other collector bins, all of us together are only getting 15% of the market share. So at Helpsy, we really do believe the biggest competition we have is the landfill, not other collectors. So most people commonly think, well, most clothing doesn't go in the trash. It actually goes to charity. And the truth is most of it actually does end up in the trash. Charities handle maybe 10 to 15% of discarded clothing, and most of them fund their missions through the sale of used clothing. They usually don't have the storage, the space, the manpower to handle sorting it. And matching clothing by size, condition, and seasonality with someone who needs it locally is really hard work, and that is not infrastructure that most nonprofits are able to support. Thrift stores also create their own waste streams as they only sell about 25% of clothes that come through their doors. So what that means is you could picture a thrift store that might be maybe it's attached to a church or it's part of like a nonprofit. Even large ones like Goodwill, they receive a lot of clothing, and right off the bat, half of it is not good enough to make it to the sales floor. The other half may not sell fast enough, so they have their own kind of textile rejects. Goodwill and Salvation Army obviously are very large organizations that have their own infrastructure to deal with that, and they can sell that on the global market, but smaller mom and pop thrift stores may not have that option. And so Helpsy provides a service where we pick up those clothes and sell them. Fiction number 2, nobody wants my old clothing, and my unwearable textiles will get thrown away anyways. So sometimes I've heard people say like, oh, this shirt, it's like an undershirt, it has sweat stains, it's too tattered, like I can't donate this, nobody wants it. And I think that's just a lack of understanding of that textiles can have a life outside of clothing. So that single sock, for example, it's probably done being a sock, but it does have value if it's absorbent or if it can be ground up into a different material. So usable clothing will be reused. You know, there's demand for that in all sizes and styles, and the unwearable items do have value as raw material. According to the Industry Association, which is Smart Secondary Materials and Recycled Textiles, about 95% of all textiles can be reused or recycled either as clothing or something else. And 5% if it's wet or molded would have to be trashed. Fiction number 3, technology is advancing rapidly and companies can recycle my clothes using chemical processes. In fact, I can buy clothes that are made with recycled textiles already. And that is true to various degrees. Reuse should be the preferred path ahead of any recycling, whether it's mechanical or chemical. And there is a lot of innovation and kind of like a lot of attention if you follow you know, these kinds of companies and startups on LinkedIn. There's a lot of attention for chemical recycling, textile to textile recycling. You'll hear that, and that's very exciting. But from an environmental point of view, depending on their process, there is a lot of energy usage and emissions that go along with the chemical process. So it may not be as ideal as we think. Oftentimes clothing, if you've seen it with a label, it's like, oh, made with, whatever percent recycled material. It may be made of recycled material, but it might have been rPET from plastic bottles, not necessarily textiles. So that's kind of nothing happening at scale yet. So what happens to used clothing? Well, 85%, like we said, ends up in the municipal waste stream. 95% could be reused as clothing or something else. So I think the reuse of clothing is easy to visualize. If it's still usable, and desirable, somebody will buy it and use it again as clothing. This something else may be new for you, and that something else could be wipers, or it could be insulation. So here are industrial wiping cloths, and this is a picture of basically insulation or something that can be used as padding. So at Helpsy, we focus on reuse first and foremost. It's the best for the environment, and it also makes the most economic sense. We sort in our facility in New Jersey that some of you were able to visit. I think it was a couple months ago. But out of the clothes that we sell, 90% are sold to bulk. So we're not sorting everything that we get. We get 33 million pounds a year, and we're just not able to sort that volume. But of the clothes that we do sort, they're sold locally to thrift stores and resellers. And the clothes that we don't sort are sold in bulk quantities to graders and thrift stores. So while it is a global market, we have many domestic partners. And last year, for example, 97% of what we sold was sold in North America. We also have a good relationship with our bulk customers. So these are customers who are buying 40,000 pounds of clothes at a time. And we buy things back from them that don't work, keeping very true to our mission that clothes aren't trash. So if they have a lot of plus size clothes or winter clothes, and their clients are looking for, more warm or tropical weather clothes, we buy that back from them because they don't have a use for it. Just an industry term is credential versus thrift. So when I talk about the bulk customers, they're buying bales, which are essentially 1,000-pound bricks of clothes. It makes it easier to load a container. And there's two kinds of products that we sell in bulk quantities. It's credential and thrift. So credential means nobody has sorted through it. Not Helpsy, not somebody else. It didn't come from a thrift store. It came, direct from a person's house. It came from a clothing drive. It came from a bin. And so that has a higher perceived value because in theory, all the good stuff is still in there. Thrift, on the other hand, means somebody has sorted through it. It could have come from a thrift store, and maybe it's stuff that didn't sell. Maybe Helpsy sorted through it, and it's stuff that for whatever reason didn't meet our requirements. So it's generally perceived to have a lower value. There's still plenty of usable clothing in there. It's just two different markets. And then on the Helpsy side of clothes that we do sort, we're selling them through Helpsy Source. And so these would be curated, much smaller packs, could be 40, could be 100. And it's by brand and by condition. So we sell those to thrift stores or to online resellers. And this is a business model that is business to business. It's not direct to consumer, because if, for example, you wanted to buy 40 Lululemon items, you wouldn't know what color, size, or style they were. You would just know the brand and that they've met our condition standard. This is part of my Follow the Textiles tour. This was in Texas. This is a facility that takes wipers. So when we sell, for example, I don't think the video is going to play. Oh, again. When we sell these containers to our sorting partners in North America, they'll go through it themselves. They'll keep, whatever they can reuse for resale. And then there's a pile that they didn't meet their requirements. Maybe it was, a single sock, or the t-shirt was stained, or whatever the reason is. And so then they go to a wiping partner who basically is going to sort it by material composition and say, okay, this is a cotton t-shirt. This is a white cotton t-shirt. This is a polyester. This is a blend. And you can see here that they sort denim is another common material. Then it's a pile of white t-shirts, and they're cutting them basically to make it into wipers. So this simple machine just cuts basically t-shirts to make them into wipers. So that's one thing that happens with t-shirts. Next slide. Okay, this one is a different process. This was actually in Guatemala, and this is a sorting partner that closed that they reject, and this even includes manufacturing scraps. They have a process, and they have the machinery to basically make this kind of stuffing and insulation. I see a question, what is a wiper? A wiper is basically like they're used as industrial rags. So basically it's like an absorbent material. If there's like think of like a restaurant or even like in the oil industry, just to like wipe up things that spill. This mechanical process is used to make carpet paddings, or it can be stuffing for mattresses and things of that nature. And essentially what they're doing is taking different materials based on the composition, and they're basically following a recipe. They're like, okay, if we put this much polyester, we need to have this much cotton to get the right consistency of whatever product that they're making. Here's just another view of what that product looks like. You can see it has, lots of different colors, so it's coming from all different kinds of materials. And on the chemical front, it's a different process. This was a lab that I visited in Connecticut. They're using polyester feedstock that we supply, and they are basically taking the polyester through a chemical process and making it into this white powder, which can then be made into pretty much anything where that polyester is normally used for. For this particular company, we're providing they're tablecloths that are 100% polyester and have absolutely no reuse or reuse value. It's end-of-life tablecloths from the hospitality industry, and so we're able to connect that there. This, in our opinion, is what should be considered for recycling, not clothing, because clothing can be reused for other purposes, but things that truly have no resale value and no reuse value should be considered for recycling. Some legislative highlights. Massachusetts banned textiles from the trash. That was at the end of 2021, effectively 2022. Europe is ahead of us in like almost everything, but they have a lot of extended producer responsibility law that they're talking about. California and New York here in the United States each are considering EPR laws. Neither of them have passed. I think California may pass this year. That's kind of the hope. And because of this, I think brands are becoming more and more serious about sustainability and resale. Of course, when there's legislative support, things tend to happen more quickly. Legislation is needed on both the producer side and also the consumer side if we're really going to solve this problem. I don't know if anybody followed Circulose, which was a product produced by Renewcell. It actually went bankrupt. They have new owners now, but it just kind of highlights the need for legislation. They had a process pretty much at scale to make recycled material Circulose. The problem was there weren't enough brands willing to buy it because it was voluntary at that point.
Lisa, if I could jump in with a quick question here from the chat. It was asked if wipers are washed and reused by the company that uses it for wiping, or are they just used once and disposed of?
Yeah, great question. Thanks. So I can't speak for every company. I don't know how they operate, but we've transacted with a couple wipers, and they actually buy them, use them, and then someone else washes them and then they use them again. So they can get a good amount of reuse. I can't say for certain that everybody does it that way. But they're not just single use basically. And there's even someone who uses them to wipe up oil. And then somebody else actually extracts the oil from the rags because they can get more value out of that, and then they give the rags back.
So it may seem obvious based upon the name that a wiper is used to wipe, and I assume, I assume they can be used to wipe anything that needs to be wiped. Is that fair? So
yeah, and actually they can be used to wipe anything. Picture if you had like a spill in your home and you used a cotton t-shirt to wipe it up, like it would wipe it up. It's absorbent.
Yeah, and those of you who have kids have wiped things up too that we won't mention here, but
yeah, I was actually talking to my mom about this recently. She's always curious about what I'm doing. And she's like, oh, you know what? Your grandmother used to do that. She would just cut up your old clothes, like, our old clothes, and use them around the house to just like clean stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's basically what it is, just at an industrial scale.
What's old is new. Yeah,
exactly. It's like we've just gotten kind of far away from that. But yeah, so That's kind of a decent transition to what is needed for a circular economy. Well, we need collection systems to be convenient and widespread. We're competing essentially against the trash, where people literally just put it in the trash and it's gone. You know, if you think of my neighbor who I don't know who it was. I have no idea who it was, but I mean, it's right now the most convenient thing is just like, I want it gone. I want to put it in the trash. And that could have been, you know, motivated by, you know, convenience, but also just a lack of education. Maybe that person really didn't think that anybody would want these clothes and there was no value in them. So that's one thing we need. We do need regional sorting facilities to kind of basically sort out like what is reusable, what is wiper worthy, what is, you know, could be ground up, what could be a candidate for other recycling, etc. We need end markets for whatever is sorted and whatever is produced. That includes brand agreements, as highlighted by Renuso. They came up with a process, and even all the startups that are working on textile to textile recycling. Well, we need brands to commit to buying, you know, those volumes and using that material. We also need stakeholder education. Textiles is something that is very complicated, and I think partly because there's so many people involved. It's nonprofits, it's thrift stores, it's charities, it's the recycling coordinators, it's, you know, fashion designer. There's so many people involved with textiles. Oh, and then by the way, like everybody wears clothes. So everybody's a stakeholder in some capacity. So tremendous efforts in education have to be made. So kudos to you all for being here, and hopefully you'll share something that you learned broadly. We also need supportive policies, you know, on both sides, and collaborative partnerships. So because there are so many different people involved with the movement of textiles, collaboration is key. And that's just, you know, for solving any problem really. The photo on the right here is a paper. I'm Marissa Adler on textile recovery in the United States. I would highly recommend it if you are interested in learning more. I'd also point you to Fashion for Good. We participated in their study, and they kind of did from let's say global, but from like a national perspective, what does it look like? What are people saying? And kind of how you can get involved.
Quick question for you, Lisa.
Yeah.
Have you seen any uptick in the volume as fast fashion has taken hold in the clothing world?
Yeah, absolutely. Fast fashion basically makes it very easy for people to buy disposable clothing, or what they think of as disposable, right? If you only spent $2 on it, you wear it once or not at all, and you already got your money's worth. So I think that's a shift, a societal shift that we're trying to combat in, you know, the amount of material that is produced and how quickly it's being disposed of. We've also seen an uptick or a rise in collections from Massachusetts specifically. So Helpsy works in 10 states. Massachusetts is one of them. They banned textile waste, and we did see an increase, you know, the first full year that ban was in effect, of about 15%. And I think that was a lot due to the awareness that the ban brought with it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I've said this and I'll say it again. Reuse should be the preferred path ahead of recycling for anything, but particularly textiles. I think it's interesting, but not surprising, that clothing reuse has a 70-time lower environmental impact than producing new garments. So going to a thrift store and using clothes that already exist is probably the best way that you as an individual can get involved. And recycling should only be considered for low value garments, scraps of materials, etc. That's from a study that came from Europe last year. And from Fashion for Good Europe, there are no technologies available that can actually replace the categorization of textiles based on their values for reuse. So there is a lot of innovation, not only in the chemical recycling processes, but also in, you know, machines that can sort by material type, and that's great and it's needed. However, they cannot capture reuse value yet. So where does sorting technology stand today? Well, they're still very manual. And even with automation, there's still some manual pre-processing needed. So here's just quick at a glance, in case anybody's curious or has been following it, of like what technologies exist. There are some that use NIR to scan for material composition. There's some that are more advanced and do NIR, which is near infrared, with some kind of like machine learning. And then there's some algorithms that are based on AI. And you can kind of see what the pluses and minuses are. So for NIR. It's good for detecting material type. It's more accurate than reading garment labels. They can be small and handheld. We've used a handful of them at Helpsy for various projects. But similar to plastics, it has a hard time when something is dark, so it can't read if it's, a black material. If it's multi-layer, if you look at something that you're wearing right now, it's probably possible that you have, jeans on with a pocket. Well, the pocket is probably made of a different material than the denim. Or if you're wearing a blazer, there's multi-levels, multi-layers that kind of make that challenging. And of course, the shortcoming is it has no idea if it's valuable for resale or not. It can just tell you what it's made out of. Even if you add some visible spectrum machine vision to it, some VIS, it's more advanced, it has more automation, it can be more expensive, and it still won't tell you if it's viable for resale, basically. And then there's some AI algorithms that are really useful, I think, in the resale community. Once you've determined that you want to resell them, because you can take a picture, it'll take the color, the size, it can even do the brand, and it kind of helps you make those listings if you've ever been on like Poshmark or eBay. So a little bit about Helpsy. We have kind of 3 buckets of impact, is how we think of it. It's like the environmental impact of keeping clothes out of the trash and connecting them with their next best use. Socially, we are very proud of our employment practices. We offer full-time jobs with living wages to all of our employees who are all shareholders in the company. And we are a second chance employer. We also structure our line staff to have a high amount of variable comp, and that allows them to, they earn an hourly wage, and then they earn, for example, our drivers earn up a commission for every pound of clothing that they bring in. That incentivizes them to be very productive. And some of them make, way more than they ever thought they could. And that's really an exciting part for us. In the community, we work with nonprofits, mostly by taking clothes that people have dropped off and they can't actually use. For example, if you think of Dress for Success, they're looking for clothing for a specific client type, they're looking for workwear, and maybe people dropped off, athletic wear that's, totally fine and usable, but doesn't help meet their clients' needs. So we basically buy that from them so that they have the capital to basically fund their missions. We are a B Corp and a public benefit corporation. The B Corp is something we have to constantly reapply for. We're in the middle of our application process again this year. But the public benefit corporation is something that sticks forever. So if their Helpsy is ever sold, for example, these values are like part of the company, so they cannot be changed ever. And then there's an economic part to our impact as well, where last year, for example, we estimate we avoided over $1 million in tipping fees for the various communities that we work with, basically diverting these textiles from landfills. We're supporting a lot of reuse economy jobs and thrift stores in the United States. We operate 3 lines of business. So collect, this is a little map of like basically all the places we have bins where we collect from thrift stores. Source, I talked about already, is basically how we sort the clothing and we're selling it for to thrift stores and resellers. And then trading I haven't touched on yet, but that basically is a 3rd line of business, and they all work in tandem so that we can handle basically any textile material. So the trading part gives us access to all kinds of weird stuff. So we can find homes for weird things. Believe it or not, there are customers for single shoes. There are customers for fleece. There are customers for wipers, which hopefully isn't as weird, but even bikes and things, because those folks may have thrift stores in tremendous capacity for repairing items that we just don't have. So here are our collection methods, trying to be as convenient as widespread as possible. Bins, we do clothing drives and fundraisers. That's a really easy way to get involved. It could be for a community that has a paper shredding day. It could be for someone's like little league team that needs to raise money for the uniforms. We basically pay per pound collected. In select cities, and hopefully in Maryland soon, we'll be able to do home pickups, which is, as convenient as you can get when we come to people's houses, and then we work with thrift stores on their excess. The Helpsy Source app Basically was developed in-house with our own technology team. It gives us really rich data on brands that are coming in and in what condition. So as brands' sustainability initiatives are rising, a lot of them are interested to know, well, how much of my clothes come to Helpsy and in what condition are they in? So it gives them visibility on what happens to their goods post-consumers. That's not something that they would normally have access to otherwise. Through sorting, we are also able to support our Project Warmth, which is where we, through our sorting process, find coats that are warm and secondhand and all usable, all the buttons work, all the zippers works, that we donate in the winter. So we're actually in the middle of picking up those coats now and sorting them out, because usually starting November is when we start donating our coats. So if you think of anybody, we donate them to organizations who then donate them to individuals. So if you think of anybody who could benefit from some used coats, please keep us in mind. This is a container of clothing. It's just to represent what the materials that we can broker. Like I said, it's textiles and all kinds of weird stuff, including brica, which are hard plastic toys, luggage, baby items. There's a market for all kinds of used goods. So if you're interested in working together, these are just some ideas of ways that we frequently interact. Like I said, I was a secondary math teacher, so one of my passion projects is pushing into the classrooms. I deliver lesson plans. This was one I did earlier this year. You could also consider hosting a collection event to the benefit of a charity of your choice, your kids' Little League team, or anything like that. And then Project Warmth is something also to consider. Last year we focused mostly on New Jersey. This year we're open, for anybody who has requests. So please keep this in mind and let us know as soon as possible if you're interested or know somebody, an organization that could benefit from some used coats. So thank you very much.
Wow, my brain is full. That was great, Lisa. That's a wonderful story. It's very heartwarming, and not that we need warming today, but I was going to say bathing suits have to be in high demand at this point, right? So I'm going to suggest if anyone has any follow-up questions, please be sure to post them in the chat. Andrew, you got a question? You're welcome to use your mic as well.
Thank you for the presentation. It was excellent. Are you seeing an uptake or an uptick in the number of brands that are exploring the idea of, instead of consumer purchase, consumer lease, where I lease my pair of jeans and then I return them at some point? Is that a growing thing, or is that very niche still?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm thinking of Rent the Runway. That one comes to mind, where I think that's the same idea. It started as being, very fashionable clothes that you would rent for a wedding or a special event, and I think they've branched out to like everyday wear. We actually partner with companies like that for whenever they deem their clothes to be out of season, or it's reached, too many uses, or however they kind of like determine that their inventory is out of stock. We work with them on that. I haven't seen necessarily like an uptick in those types of business models. I have seen, and this is worth noting, a lot of an uptick in the brands selling their own secondhand products, which I think is positive. I think realistically it's like a drop in the bucket. But there are, brands handling their own resale programs on their website. So if you look at, for example, Lululemon has a like new, so they sell their own Lululemon items that somebody else is, they're lightly worn, I guess. But they're, I guess, able to, it's like another revenue stream, and it is, more sustainable than making new clothes.
Paul Varga's got a question.
So question and like a comment too. Just a quick comment on the drives. We as a municipality here in Frederick County have done a couple of drives. In fact, we have more planned in the future, as there's a large community need for it, as Lisa showed with her picture as being a resident of Frederick County. There is a need for it. And we've had a lot of success with Helpsy as a partner too. Just the fact that they take so much has been a really, really great asset to having successful drives. I mean, we've been able to divert in 2 hours with another community partner. We were able to divert almost like 3 tons, 3.5, almost over 3.5 tons of material. So it's a great resource that Helpsy's been. And at least my question beyond my comment here. So
well, first, thank you for the comment. I love that it's, you know, in my backyard, and I love working with your team on it.
So that's it does work. So if anyone's listening and they're wondering about drives and the impact that drives can have, they do have a big impact. It's not just just little. It's big. So it's awesome. The question is, I don't know if you said it to me or maybe somebody else, but I heard that there's enough textiles and created that we no longer need to actually get any new material for clothing. I don't know if you said that to me or maybe I picked that up somewhere. And you kind of outlined some of the challenges of recovery of those items. One, are we at the stage where we're putting a Band-Aid on a bigger, I guess, mark, or are we just at the beginning where we're actually finding a solution? What do you see in that and being able to actually, forego making any new materials?
I have heard that statistic. I don't think you heard it from me because I can't quote it, but I have heard something like, if we stop producing clothes today, we have enough to like clothe the next X number of generations, which I totally believe. Is it more of a Band-Aid? Honestly, I think so, especially when we talk even the brands and, their take back programs and their secondhand resale. I mean, it's a drop in the bucket. Like, that's not going to solve the problem. It really does need to be a widespread. There needs to be legislation. There needs to be a, big shift, the 3 R's. The first one is reduce. So that's reduce. We need to reduce, the amount of material that's being used and created. As consumers, sometimes you feel powerless. I'm like, well, I can't make H&M stop producing clothes, but you can make choices for yourself, right? You can vote with your dollar. You can, not to point out H&M specifically, but you can just be more mindful of what you're buying, what you're using. Like, is there someone that you could swap with? I think the stigma perhaps that existed with thrift stores is diminishing really rapidly, which is good. There's, the stigma maybe was, you only buy thrift clothing because you can't afford new. Well, no, there's a lot of other reasons to do that, including environmental, right? You get more unique pieces and you're doing something for the environment. I think the most important thing we can do is reuse what we already have. And if you're done with stuff, that doesn't mean you have to keep the same outfits forever. If you're done with stuff, then discard it responsibly. I love buying stuff from thrift stores, and then when I'm done with it, giving it back to the same thrift store. There's a vintage shop downtown in Frederick where I've literally done that. I'm like, I bought it, and like, you don't need to give me any money for it, but I'm not going to wear it anymore. Here it is. Someone else can buy it. Or obviously, I take stuff to work all the time. But no, I think generally what's happening isn't happening fast enough to solve the problem.
As one who came from a family of 7, I had the opportunity to wear many of my older brother's clothes. My parents never asked me to wear any of my older sister's clothes, but
well, that's good.
There was a lot of hand-me-downs, so there was a circular economy in our household, and that makes economic sense more than anything else, right? So there was a question, and you, Lisa, you and I talked about this before, about those other bins that we see around our neighborhoods, and so the question is, are they? Can we consider them generally reputable? And if not, what is the telltale that helps us know, maybe I shouldn't put my clothes there?
Yeah, great question. So I would file this under things I didn't know before I worked at Helpsy, right? So there is a pretty intense process for being able to place a bin reputably. So usually that entails, obviously you would need permission from whoever owns the property. Sometimes there are additional permits required, and you're actually basically renting and paying for that little piece of parking lot. So a telltale sign, if it's a reputable bin, you'll know the name of the organization. There'll be a contact number. It'll have like a website that actually goes somewhere. There's one by me. I was telling Peter earlier. It's like the bane of my existence. It's like 4 pieces of plywood spray painted together and it says like 1-800-cancer. Like that is not a reputable bin. It doesn't have a phone number. I would guarantee they don't have permission to be there. And there are some people that do that because there is value in the clothes. So they're basically putting their little container out for free. People are putting clothes in and then they're just taking it. And sometimes they come in and disappear. So I would look for that. You'd look for if there's a nonprofit association, their EIN number should be on there. So yeah, that would be something to look for. Usually the municipalities' websites have resources on like what to do with certain materials. So that can also help you find locations that are, have been vetted by somebody and they're legitimate in that capacity.
So Lisa, Tim Kerr asked a question which may presage some of the clothes that will have electronics embedded within them, because we're doing a session we did a session on batteries, and we're doing another webinar on batteries in the fall, and they certainly are spontaneously combustible. But the question was, have you had any greasy or oily rags donated that have spontaneously combusted, perhaps left out in the heat long enough?
God, no. Thank God, no. We have not, but on the electronics comment, I'm thinking of heated blankets. That's something that our warehouse is like, what are we supposed to do with it? Is it an electronic or is it a blanket? We actually do have e-waste partners, because even though our bins say clothing and shoes, people are like, oh, this is a great place to put my toaster that I don't want anymore, or like my TV. So we do separate, electronics, and we have a company that responsibly handles those, and heated blankets go in that pile.
So Lisa, I think I know the answer to this question, but someone was asking about where do people in Maryland and elsewhere donate damaged clothes?
So Helpsy takes damaged clothes as long as it's dry and odorless. So you can go on our website to find a bin near you. I don't know who else takes stained clothing, to be honest. I think Goodwill might. I'm not sure.
No. Well, at least that's been my experience. Maybe they've changed their mind. Maya was asking, and I saw this when you showed your diagram where Helpsy is pretty much an East Coast, Northeast based company. Are there barriers to expansion elsewhere? Plans to expand elsewhere? Are there other companies already there? What's the thinking?
Yeah, great. So we're on the Northeast, basically South Carolina up to New Hampshire. Is where we are as far as our collections go. We, through Helpsy Source, we sell, across, I think the 48. I don't know that we sell to Alaska or Hawaii, but we sell nationally that way. But where we collect from is on the East Coast, and density is really important from an emissions point of view, but also from an efficiency and an economic point of view. If you've operated any kind of truck, whether that's, picking up recycling or trash, whatever it is, density makes sense. If you can go and there's like a bunch of bins and thrift stores and, the network is dense, we can manage costs that way. We don't have any immediate plans to expand outside of the states. What we're looking for is really layering that density. And I think based on the EPA's numbers and what we collect, we estimate that just of the states that we're in, we are collecting 1% of the clothes.
Wow.
Produced in those areas. So density is kind of what we're looking for.
So Lisa, this is a question that you and I sort of talked a little bit about before we got started this morning. So we were talking about mattress recycling, and I mentioned Turbo Haul and Kevin Daly, who's on the call. He was asking about recycling a shoddy, which I presume is that stuff inside the mattress. I don't remember. I apologize, Kevin, because you probably explained it far better than I am. But he wonders, can the company in Guatemala utilize post-consumer shoddy in their process?
I don't know the answer to that. I'd be happy to facilitate that conversation, because I'm also thinking of a mattress recycling company in Massachusetts that I was connected to recently, and they may be able to find a solution for that. But yeah, I think I can put my email in the chat, and Kevin, you feel free to reach out.
Excellent. Question from R. What do you recommend for stained clothing for donations? And I think we sort of addressed that, but is there, and R is in the DMV, the DC metro area. Any place in particular that you think?
I mean, beyond a Helpsy bin. I mean, I truthfully don't know who else takes them. If we don't have any mids in your area, I would check your municipality's website and see what resources they can point you to.
I see you posted your find a bin link. Thank you very much. And I was going to ask Lisa, you referenced at least 2 reports that we probably want to share with people. So if you would do me a favor and just go ahead and share those links with me, I'll add them to our follow-up when we post the recording of the today's presentation.
Yeah, and there's a couple of books I can recommend too if you're interested in following what happens to used clothing and used materials globally. It's really interesting. So if you have a need for finding out more, I'd be happy to share that with you too.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I think the popcorn in the microwave has gotten very quiet. We probably hit the end of our questions. And this has been, I've really enjoyed this presentation, Lisa, and we need a big round of applause for Lisa today. I think she's done a phenomenal job and a great story to tell. Hope to keep up with the conversation. So before we go and everybody jumps off to lunch, please make sure you mark your calendars for our upcoming webinars on batteries and building reuse and the conference next June. And again, if you're not a member, please take the opportunity to join today. Like I said, you can join for $25 a year. Less than 50 cents a day, great way to support MRN. And we are very active in Annapolis, trying, as Lisa noted, trying to ensure that there's legislation around that will get textiles into the right place. So thanks very much. Thanks to Lisa and Helpsy, and thanks to all of you for joining me today. Look forward to seeing you at our next webinar in September. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.